Welcome back to the dopest show you won't get sick of. I'm Spencer. This is Sasha. Spent most of my 20s in federal prison, but I've been off heroin since April 9, 2010. Got a lot of stories about the stupid stuff I did to get put in prison. I've also got a lot of stories about the crazy stuff that happened while I was in prison. And God forbid you end up in prison, you want to make some of the same mistakes I made. This is a crazy story about how addiction will make you do stupid stuff. I had a large amount of something that could have got me in a whole lot of trouble. And addiction made me say, screw it, I need to get back to get this. So I had 44 personal friends, not acquaintances, that had passed away from drugs or drug-related violence. One of the people in this story is from the violence part. If it was just acquaintances, it'd be in probably a couple hundred. But I'm talking personal friends. Lost my 20s to federal prison, not condoning it, not supporting it. But a lot of this stuff has a lesson to it, okay? I was addicted to dealing as much as I was using, if not more. Thought I was going to be the next George Jung, so as long as I had a connection, I had plenty of money, plenty to do everything else. Connection fell off, something happened, they left town, whatever, it fell all apart, and I'd end up broken gutter as could be. Oh, kept it gutter many a times. I kept it really gutter. You know, I got stories about that I'll get to too. I got some war stories that rival some of the craziest ones you've ever heard anybody tell, of the most gutter stories I've had. But this particular time I did have a connection. So I did drug court the first time. I was in there for a misdemeanor. I was told if you do drug court you can get out day after tomorrow. If not, you'll stay another 6 weeks in here. And I said, well shoot, sounds pretty good. It's my first time in jail, been in there a month. Said you can get out in 2 days. Said, yeah, I'll give drug court a try, I reckon. So I tried drug court. I was in it for all of 2 weeks, and I ended up getting a month in jail. Typically you get a weekend, let out, slap on the wrist. No, I got a month because I was honest, because my probation officer with the speech impediment told me, if you're honest with me, I'll work with you, my mum pal. And I said, okay, well, let me be honest with him, because I knew I was getting tested that day, and I was honest. He called the main guy back there, and he's like, we might need to detain him. So I got detained till the next drug court, and then after a month, they put me in rehab. Now, this is not a cushy rehab. This is not, you know, any of that California stuff you see. This is public rehab. This is gutter, okay? Streetwalkers and interdicted people. There are probably 4 interdicted people in there. Now, what interdiction means, in my area, they do this. I don't know about other areas. But to crack down on the drunk in public, so the drunks, homeless people, if they get like 10 drunk in Publix, they'll interdict them. What that means is they can't have alcohol in their possession. They can't be in a car with alcohol. They can't have it in their system. If they get caught with alcohol, they'll get put in jail for like a month at a time. I don't know how I feel about that. I think it's, you know, infringing on basic, you know, rights of people, regardless of whether they're alcoholics or not. But those are the people I'm in rehab with. Homeless people, you know, gutter people, you know, and a lot of the people I couldn't identify with until somebody showed up. This dude was about 6'3", 350, former college football player. And, you know, I've heard of this guy. He's the man. Now, there have been legends and stories been told about this guy. We end up becoming best friends. And I end up getting out. He ends up getting out. He was in rehab because he liked to do e-pills and stuff like that. He's probably an addict himself, just not the same things that, you know, other people were. And the judge gave him a chance to do the rehab. So I get out myself for him for a good bit. And I was actually, made me a better drug dealer being in drug court because I got drug tested. So I was only doing acid on the weekends. Stuff like that for the most part. 'Cause I thought they couldn't drug test for that. They can, by the way. That's not true. In drug court, somebody fell for acid. You never heard 100-some drug addicts start whispering. I've never seen a judge hit the hammer before until that moment when they announced this guy had failed a urine screen for acid. But they can test for that. So I quit drug court. Did 6 weeks in jail, got out. And I started doing the same stuff. Only now, I don't have drug tests. Don't be my answer to. So, I'm using up pretty much most of my profits. Everything I'm making is giving me a place to sleep, food to eat, gas in the car, drugs to use, and I'm pretty much making it time by time, re-up to get back. So one particular day, it was actually in the evening, I'd hit off most of the people who bought regularly, and I went to the man's house, big man, and I show up with my 3250 to re-up. And I walk in there and he gives it to me, but I keep smelling something. And I'm like, man, I know that smell. Now keep this in mind, at this time I was 140 pounds, scrawny at this time. He's 6'3", 350, former college football player. I walk right past him in his own home without permission. He's like, hey, where you going? I was like, and I walk in the kitchen and I said, uh-oh. And I see it. There's one guy who's no longer with us. He's passed from the violence part. There's another guy who I'll call the man from New York. He reminds you of Charlie Murphy, okay? It's kind of like when Rick James was making fun of Charlie Murphy, and he said, you know how Charlie Murphy's like, Rick James, tell me about this, and how his upper lip don't move, and how he talks like this, and he said that wasn't because of coke, that was just how it was, that's just how his face was. Well, that's how this guy talked, like his upper lip didn't move, and everything he said like this, and you'd see all the whites in his eyes. And big dude, looked like he probably lifted weights in prison most of his life, and he leaned into it, leaned his chest like way out there, make himself look big, tell he's fond of himself. I saw the car out front. There's a station wagon version of a car that was like $100-some thousand. That's part of why I walked in the back too, but I smelled it. It was dope. They had a lot, well in the six figures, and they had a lot of cut. And they had screens, and they had giant boxes that they were seething it through with little spoons and individually getting each one ready. And I looked at big man and I said, hey, let me give you about $200 back off this pack I just bought off you so I can get some of this. He's like, nah, man, come on, we ain't done that. I done broke it out, broke everything, you know it. I said, you ain't gonna do that? He said, nah, man. He said, come on back here in a minute. You bought that, that's what it is, come on. Because just like old dirty bastard, oh baby, I like it raw. And it was raw, but they're cutting it. They're getting ready to cut it all up. I'm an addict. I don't want it cut up. I want it raw. So I'm in a rush against time. Can I get back before they've cut, before they've mixed as much as they could? Because they were mixing it, mixing, all going through the screen. So it's all the same mixture. Wasn't as good of a screen as I'd used to use. Back when I was 16, I used more professional screens. This was more like just an amateur screen you get at something like Walmart. The finer screen it is, it ensures it's one mixture. And anyway, they got their little utensils, getting everything ready. So I start calling people up. I call the first person who got some off me early. He's like, dude, I just got that off you. No, I don't have any money. I go money to money, time to time. He is addicted to dope. But see, I'd stayed away from dope. I'd messed with blow, I'd messed with other stuff, but I'd stayed away from dope. And the purpose for that was, when I was 16 years old, I knew how cheap we were getting it for. We were getting it for like $3 and then selling it for $20 a piece. So I had like too much, this is going to sound odd, but it's how it was. I had too much pride to pay that much for that little when I know how much money they're making off of it. So I stayed away from it. But this is a giant wholesaler who's getting ready to sell it to me dirt cheap. Like literally for $100 of what I could have bought from this guy retail of raw would make what would sell for roughly $800 retail or more. Okay, you got to factor the cut in there. I'm not even factoring that in there. So I start calling people up, keep bombing out, can't get a hold of anybody. Everybody's already bought it off me today. I need somebody to buy some so I can go back there and get this before they cut. I get a hold of this one guy. Hey, you got to think, I'm like 18 years old. Everybody, my friends, was like 17, 18, 19. There's some people hung out to us. They were like in their 30s. Like me hanging out to kid right now. You know, look at that as silly as it is. But this guy, he's partying at this club that's at a it's like the strip mall that goes around back, front, but there's a restaurant and bar. Everybody goes drinking and party at it. I said, dude, I got a deal for you. He's like, oh yeah, what's that? I wasn't really looking for too much right now or anything. I'm like, you will be tonight. I'm going to give you this much for this much. And got like a couple $100 from him. gave him practically my price for it. And he's like, "Are you sure, man?" He says, "There anything funny?" I said, "I'll let you try it first." And I let him try. He got in the car. First off, I drove there. I have $3,250 of something I'm not supposed to have in the car. I should have drove it to the place that it was supposed to be stashed, broken down, and everything else up at. I usually broke it into a few different places in case something were to happen. I'm driving with this in the car, risking getting pulled over with this. That's a very high risk I'm taking. And I show up to this bar where there are police patrolling, police making sure people aren't DUI, and I've got $3,250 worth in the car. And I've got a little broke out for him, and I'm letting him try it in the car. It's very high risk behavior, very unlike me. I am extremely careful, but all caution went to the wind because I'm an addict, and I wanted to get back there in this race against time. So he gets in the car, tries some. He's like, "Dude, thank you. Let me know if you want to do this again." I said, "Hey, this is probably a one-time thing, bud, but I appreciate you." And I get back in the car. I drive 5 miles an hour over the speed limits, as much as I ever do, even today, back there. But around corners that people would usually slow down to 25 around in a 45 mile an hour zone, I'm going 50 around these corners with tires screeching on my S2000, thinking I'm, Tokyo Drift. I mean, this is Fast and the Furious days. I know it's embarrassing. That's how it was back then. That was the big thing. We was all souping up our cars, and I had some put in my car. That was one thing that I did love back then was that car. But I get back to the place, and the man from New York, who was in the back, the one who talks like Charlie Murphy, said, "You want to make some money?" I said, "Absolutely." He said, "Help us bag some of this up." So I got this tiny little spoon that makes no sense. It's like little teeny tiny, little handle on it, and each one done a whole bunch of them up. And they don't. And I regretted agreeing to do that because I realized it's going to take me longer now before I can use some. You don't do drugs in front of these people, and that's something I knew. So somehow I sat there for another 30 minutes, 45 minutes doing this, bagging this up. Like, oh, why'd I agree to do this? But got it wrong, got it uncut, and it was the start of something bad. It opened up a whole nother can of worms. I was so excited to get back, so excited to get everything else, but it opened up that Pandora's box. You can't just do one when you're an addict. The biggest trick an addict has is, I'm just going to do one today, tomorrow to be a new day, I'll get back to going how I was. No, that's not how it works. And through this stories, there's a whole nother set of stories, but it was just the teeniest amount, and it left me where I couldn't even. I could hear everything that was going on around me. I knew everything that was going on. I lift my hand up to about here, and then that was it. Had to fall back down. Wasn't on the needle back then. At that point, wasn't doing that. Didn't like that. Didn't like to have people do that around me. But it opened up that door again. And yeah, I wasn't clean at the time. I was still doing blow, selling blow, everything else like that. But there is a whole nother animal. See, with people that are addicted to coke, it's a mental addiction. It's a mental addiction. It's not as much of a physical thing. And it's a terrible mental addiction. God, you get people addicted to rock or blow. It's a terrible mental addiction, especially the people that do it all day, every day. It's something that's really hard to shake. But dope, it's a whole other thing. And then get people addicted to the needle. There's so many weird little things that people do with that. Habits, routines, almost like rituals, that people go through with that. And it led back to that point. It led to a series of events that the guy who I was friends with that ended up setting me up, it led to that. Even if I hadn't switched off to, dealing with both of them, and I had just stuck with blood, it was going to happen eventually. But, the big reason there's war on opiate stuff like that right now, and it's not on the other stuff, is because it's what's taking people out. There is almost an equal problem today with counterfeit pills of amphetamine-based pills, Adderall, stuff like that, that have speed in them, that are fake. But why isn't that a big thing? Why don't you see that on the news too much? Because it's not taking people out. The counterfeit Roxy 30s, that's what is taking people out. But this led back to, oh man, it was an event, it was a time, like I could pinpoint it. Like when you look back at certain points of your life and you can pinpoint, this was a defining moment. This was a time when stuff started to change for the worst. This was a time when stuff started to change for the worst. This moment from then on, and I'll tell you, the person who I started dealing with didn't have any dealings with before, in a long time. I've told a story about that one guy, the kid that showed up with $6,000 to get a bunch of stuff, and he started crying because he realized his headlights were out on the car and it was starting to get dark, and we had to follow him back with $6,000 worth the first day we ever met him. Started dealing with him again. Started dealing with all these other people. Started getting in this mix, getting in that mix. And everything went down to piss. It was already headed to piss, just in a slower motion. But when you get dope involved, it's a quick. And something interesting, with addicts, like if I were to pick up today, it wouldn't be like when I started out. When an addict picks up, they don't pick up slow. It usually picks up right where it left off. You're going to get back right to where you were just as quick. And as bad as you get this time, if you quit, and you have however long between the next time, when you pick up the next time, it'll pick up right where it was. It's continually getting that bad. But this moment, this guy from New York, and it ultimately led to the one guy, the other guy who was in the room, he ended up losing his life. It was involved over stuff like that. That was right out. The guy who did it got, arrested, put away now and everything else, but he ain't with us anymore. And that's something to take note of. But anyway, just think about this other day, got a whole lot of stories in between for each one of these stories, but there's certain stories that you can look back at that were defining moments. Even if not involved in drugs or anything like that, it can just be with life. There are certain times in life where you make a choice that's a defining moment that leads to something else, and you can look back, and if you're honest with yourself, you're like, that's what did it. That moment from then on, it led to this, led to that. Chain reaction. That's what happened this day, because I smelled it, and I walked right on back. Dope gave me the courage. I was 140 pounds. I didn't know nothing about fighting back then. Being a few little things with people my own age, stuff like that. I walked past a 6'3", 350-pound former college football player, drug dealer, was known as one of the biggest in the city, known as being bad, known as being tough. I walked right by him in his own home, disrespecting him in his own home. That's what I did, looking back at it, because I smelled what I smelled, and I knew what it was, and I was going to go see it. Dope will give you courage, make you stupid, make you do things you wouldn't normally do. Yeah, I didn't get caught that time with $32.50 worth of white in the car, but could have. And for all the times I didn't get caught, guess what? I got OJ'd. They didn't get me for that, so they got me for this type of deal. And that's why I'm telling this stuff right now. Somebody's going to learn something for something, and maybe somebody wake up. A lot of people aren't. A lot of people are going to do the same thing, stupid stuff. Going to end up back in the same old trouble and the same old thing. Going to have to go through what I went through. And maybe they might wake up. A lot of people still won't. A lot of people still be doing the same stupid stuff. But sometimes when the bad outweighs the fun, you wake up and you realize what I am doing is not working anymore. How I'm living my life is no longer manageable. The relationships that I had with family and friends before are no longer what they used to be. I've lost friends, I've lost relationship with family members, and it's time for a change. So anyway, went a little long on the whole lesson part there, so if you liked the video, press the like button. If not, wasted 19 minutes and 45 seconds of your time, which you'll never get back. But I hope you did. Y'all have a good one.